But the reason we're here tonight, let's get to why we're here, is to hear from Carlos Gonzalez de Villaumbrosia. And he's going to tell us how to be a successful product manager. He's CEO of Product School. He also was an instructor at General Assembly before and taught product management classes there. Before that, he was involved with startups. He was CEO of a startup called Flock. He wrote this book that we're talking about, the product book. That's his Twitter handle. And I'm excited to hear what he has to say about how we can improve our skills as PM. So Carlos, welcome.
Thank you, Dan. Welcome, everyone. My name is Carlos, and I've been a long-time supporter of this group. I actually started Product School at the same time as this meetup started, and I'm a very proud supporter, fan, and friend of Dan. So thank you for having me for the third time. The last two I was sharing a panel. This time he decided to give me the full stage, so I hope you enjoy. The topic of this tonight is about how to become a great product manager. My background is as a software engineer who became a product manager and then became a founder. I've done this myself, but I also helped at least 3,000 students do the same. I'm the founder of Product School. So three years ago, we started this idea that people thought it was crazy because, as you can tell, there are always more engineers and technical people than product managers. So there are over 100 coding schools out there that teach people how to get a job as a coder. But there was nothing out there to teach people how to become a product manager. And I wish I had something like this when I started my career. So that was kind of my inspiration to start this school. We started in San Francisco and we rapidly grow to a total of 6 campuses. We are in the East Coast in New York, and we also have 5 campuses on the West Coast, especially in Los Angeles area, San Francisco, and we have one close to here in Santa Clara. In all of those campuses, we teach product management. All of our classes are part-time because we understand that people who want to break into product need to have some experience before. So it's compatible with work schedule, and that's the same case for all of our instructors. They are not teachers, they are senior level product managers that come from top companies such as Google, Facebook, Uber, and so on. They keep their jobs as product managers and teach on the side. So after these years learning how to help others break into product management, we decided to consolidate some of that knowledge into a book. And we published this book on Amazon almost a year ago. It became a bestseller in the first week. And I'm very proud of it because most of the books that you will see out there about product management are about how to crack the interview, which is an important part of it. But at the end of the day, you can't just get a job by cracking the interview. You also need to know how to do your job. And there isn't much content out there. I mean, there is a lot of content, but it hasn't been curated. So you can go to the Wikipedia, or you can go pretty much to Quora, whatever you want, and type, what's product management? Or how can I prioritize my features, whatever. And there's so many questions that it's really hard to understand who's right. So I decided to just come up with this. I didn't come up with this framework. We consolidated this knowledge based on our experience teaching, and not just myself, but over 50 instructors from different companies. So we were able to put together a common process that all of us understand, and assume that at the end of the day, each of you will need to customize. But hopefully this is tactical enough to teach you how to go from, hey, I have an idea, all the way to it's out there, and then decide what you want to do with it. So this is my path, as I mentioned before. I was a software engineer, and then I became a product manager, and then I became a CEO. Pretty Silicon Valley profile. But it's not that easy. I create this second slice to kind of break down a little bit more what brought me into product. So I started computer science, as probably a lot of you, and I worked as an engineer. I had no idea what product management was, and this is 10 years ago, more or less. No idea. I just knew that even though I was good enough at coding, I didn't love it. I wasn't going to be the best in the world at coding. And I was always very curious about, but why are we doing this? I see some people smiling, probably some kind of frustrated engineers that are thinking, I know more than my boss. I was one of those that I was thinking, okay, but why do I have to code this? Or if we do this, then what? And at that time, there wasn't that much knowledge about product management. It was usually either a smart engineer or a smart designer or smart whoever kind of taking some ownership and putting the teams together. So when I moved to the Bay Area and I went to business school in Berkeley, I realized that I wasn't that unique. There were so many of people like us that understand technology, but they also want to participate in the business side of things. And kind of the mix of both is what they call product management. And I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this my whole life and I didn't know how to call it. So I've done this informally as a software engineer, but I've done this formally as a founder, because as you know, when you start a company, there's not much budget or need for a full-on product manager. It's usually the CEO who's acting as a product manager until you get to a certain stage where you start hiring product managers. So I've done that multiple times, also as a founder. And after 10 years, pretty much building products in Europe, Latin America, and North America, I decided to start this school that I wish I had when I started my career. So what's PM? Because I'm sure that each of us may have a different definition. I'm sure you've heard this definition of, I'm the mini CEO, and some people hate that definition. So I don't want to create any conflict here, but I just want you to understand what's not PM. So if you go to Wikipedia, you're probably going to find something like this. So I don't want you to read it. And nice when everybody's trying to read it. But seriously, don't read it, because that's not going to get you a job. That's not going to make you a better PM. That's the traditional definition of, okay, what the product manager does. At the end of the day, if you want to simplify this, you need to prioritize what's next based on a bunch of ideas. Some of them will come from you, some of them will come from your team, some of them will come from data, from whatever. You have to decide and then explain to your team what they have to do, because at the end of the day, as a manager, you are not going to execute much. You are not going to be the best coder nor the best designer. So you need to make sure everybody really understands what's the general direction, then keep track to make sure that we are on the same page. And then once we're ready to push that new feature or improvement or whatever we decided to do, then we also need to make sure that our users understand, so they use this more or buy this more. That's kind of a full cycle. That's not rocket science. You can find that on the Wikipedia. But I also like to define product management in a more visual way, as an intersection in between these three main groups. And I'm sure you've seen this before in many other websites. Again, it's not rocket science, and that's something that impressed me. When I learned what product management was, I realized that, okay, now it seems like the product managers are these superheroes who are doing all of this and that, and of course I give a lot of credit to the product management role, that's what I am. But at the end of the day, you are not going to be the best at anything. You are going to be good enough at pretty much everything. And that's the secret sauce. Most of us, we come from technical backgrounds, but that's not the only background. You can see a lot of designers, business people, and we'll talk more about other backgrounds. But at the end of the day, no matter where you come from, you also need to know enough about these other areas. Otherwise, you are not going to be a complete product manager. But you also have to assume that the more time you spend in the middle, the more time you spend managing, the less time you'll have executing. So even though you come from engineering and you like coding, I get it, you don't have to code anymore. And there will soon be people that code better and faster than you. And you can apply that example to design, marketing, or any other area. So paths to PM. This is something very interesting, because I just told you my path. And as Dan asked at the very beginning, we could tell that there is a fair amount of engineers. There's also a fair amount of entrepreneurs. There's only one designer. There's one data person. There's one program manager. But I promise you, I did these slides before Dan did this survey. And the results that I got are based on the data that we collected from our students at Product School. We've seen that most of the, first of all, location influences background a lot. So in our campus in New York, we get a lot of students that come from a business background. And by business, I mean consulting. While here, I don't see many consultants. Is there any consultant in the room? Okay, be proud of it. Cool. Consultants make good PMs. Obviously, software engineers. But I've seen that there's more technical people trying to break into product in the West Coast than on the East Coast. That doesn't mean that you cannot be an engineer in New York or you cannot be a consultant in San Francisco, but you get the point. Engineers, consultants, entrepreneurs, they're usually the most common backgrounds. Marketing is a very broad term, but I'm going to also mention that. And I like what you said, you are a program manager. I'm sure there's also project managers. This is a type of product management that, depending on the company and depending on your expertise, it could be considered product. And if not, you are close enough. So if your goal is to make that transition, you're in a really good spot. So these are our 5 most common backgrounds, at least based on the experience helping students. But there is more. So what is? Other types of engineering. Is there any hardware engineer in the room? Okay, great. And I'm saying great because if you're trying to break into product, you have access to a certain type of companies that someone that just comes from software couldn't even think of because of your expertise in hardware. There are so many companies in the IoT space, wearable space, that would die to have someone understands both hardware and software. So hardware engineering is definitely a great background, but not just hardware. Think of mechanical engineering, civil engineering, any type of engineering. At the end of the day, an engineer solves problems. And if you have that type of mindset, and if you are a hustler and you kind of don't settle until you fix that thing, that's a specific quality that we are always looking for in PMs across the board. So that is a good one. Finance/operations. This is especially common in New York, but is there any person here that works in ops? Okay.
I work in finance.
Finance or ops? Yeah, I put it in the same kind of category, although I know it's not always the same, because I've seen cases of people that love to get shit done. And that's another important quality. If you can prove that you can do that in a different area, but you have curiosity to translate that to our area in product management, you may be a good fit. So do not get discouraged if you are not a software engineer from a top school. You can make it. Support and QA. Someone also mentioned that they work in quality control or QA. That is another great background, because as a PM, you are identifying the problem that you want to tackle, because you cannot solve everything at the same time. And then you also need to collaborate on figuring out the right solution. In support or QA, unfortunately, you are receiving the problem. You don't get to pick. Someone picked for you, but you need to fix it. So if you can, first of all, leverage that and prove that you can also think about, hey, I'm not just going to reply to this question with a canned answer, but I'm also going to try to fix it so it doesn't happen again. And you start thinking kind of outside of the box. I've seen so many good QA and support people make good PMs. So that's another interesting path. What I'm trying to do here is to open your mind so you see that, first of all, being a PM is great, but it's also not rocket science, and there is no just one path that you need to follow. And I'll be happy to take more questions afterwards and discuss any other scenarios, either offline or at some point later. Other PM roles, and the reason why I mention this is because of what you said at the very beginning. Program manager, project manager. Depending on the size of the company, it's not just about becoming a product manager. The product team is big enough. So when the pie starts growing, you will see roles come up such as project manager, program manager, business analyst, and so on. Product designer, product marketing manager. We can talk more about that because there's also a lot of confusion. But a quick tip here for anyone looking for a PM job: read the job description and do not get discouraged just for the title of the job description, because product management could mean very different things depending on the company, depending on the size, so many things. We saw an example of Intuit. They were describing what they're looking for in a PM. Might be completely different to what another company is looking for. Think of a very technical product. They may be looking for former engineers, while if it is a more design-driven or business-driven product, they may be open to hire a designer or a consultant or an ops person. So, especially if you are not a PM yet, you could also think of this process as a two-step process, not just about, oh my God, I need to have product manager in my resume tomorrow. Maybe you can start as a project manager, program manager, business analyst, you name it, and make sure that that's really part of the product team and gets you close enough to where you want to be, and maybe once you prove, then you can ask. I've seen this working very successfully with a lot of our students that maybe don't have a lot of experience yet. So think of PM is not just product. And fun fact here is that companies like Microsoft still call product managers, as we know it, they call it program managers. So, that you also have to be careful reading the description to know what they really mean. I tend to go back to basics all the time and always look at this graph to really understand what it means. And we'll describe more and try to break it down. But anyway, you get the point here. Now, this is the graph that I wanted to show you. If you start growing your team, first of all, when you start, there is no product manager. The CEO is who is going to be in the middle, or a member of the founding team. But then you can see that project manager usually sits in between product and engineering. You will see that product marketing usually sits in between business and product. And you will see that this product designer sits in between design and product. So if you come from an engineering background or a technical background, you may qualify for a technical project manager position or a program manager position, but you may not qualify for a product designer position. So all of those stepping stones are a good segue depending on your background. Do not think that you can go from engineering to product marketing. You can go from engineering to product, but you could also do a two-step process if you do project management before. Okay, let's talk career path, because this is also very interesting. We all think about product is great, but how much does it pay? And once I get the title, then what? We saw that there were so many PMs in the room. I'm just going to ask how many of you have been PMs for more than 3 years? Okay, so you may relate to some of the stuff that I'm going to mention here. I like to use the dollar signs as the open table. You never really know, but let's start from the very, very beginning. There are so many companies, especially big companies like Intuit, Google, Yahoo, Yelp, LinkedIn, Facebook. They have APM programs or rotational programs. Basically, these programs are a good fit for either fresh grads or people that just finished business school who may not have experience as product yet, but those companies are willing to take a bet on them and give them very intense training, maybe put them in front of like different managers, and then after 6 to 12 months, they decide if they want to extend them an offer as an APM or PM. This term, APM, Associate Product Manager, has been also applied to other companies. They may not have this training program, but that's their way to say, I'm looking for a junior product manager. Nobody wants to say junior product manager. If you look at the job descriptions that Dan was posting at the very beginning, everybody's saying senior product manager. I don't want to be junior product manager, so associate sounds better. Or just product manager. Anyway, I don't think that being a PM or an APM is going to make you rich. I think the people that decide to really switch careers or start their careers in product is because they are thinking long term. When I was an engineer, I was making more money as a coder than as a manager, 100%, hands down. And I'm sure a lot of you will be making more money as a specialist than as a manager. But the key decision here is, do you want to spend your next 5-10 years as a specialist, or do you want to become a generalist? There is no right or wrong answer here, but it's something to think about, because the more time you spend as a specialist, the harder it will be for you to switch, because your salary will grow, but also your expenses will grow. And also it's harder to switch careers as we get older. So keep this in mind. It's like, oh my God, I need to do it now. But it's something to start considering, because it takes time. You know, it's like, it's not an easy transition, not a smooth transition. If you tell me, hey, I'm a Java engineer and now I want to be a Swift engineer, okay, you can catch up that no time. But if you are saying, hey, I'm a software engineer, now I want to be a product manager, it's going to require a process. Anyway, let's say that we are already product managers. What's the next step? Technically, the next step is senior product manager. Difference between a product manager and a senior product manager is just the amount of experience that you have, most of the cases. So you will still be working directly with engineers, designers, and marketers, kind of on the ground. The big jump happens after senior product manager, when you become a director of product or a group product manager. At that moment, you become a manager of product managers. So you are not working directly with engineers, designers, and marketers. You are working directly with product managers who work directly with engineers, designers, and marketers. So it's more of like a people manager than as a product manager. And the career goes on. So you can look at VP or CPO positions. Obviously, if you're in a startup, everybody's a VP. So this doesn't apply. I'm just thinking about companies that truly have people in each step of the ladder. And at the end of the day, and this is an important point to consider, CEOs or at least in most of the technology companies, still have a huge, they want to have a huge influence on the product. And you will see this all the time. Most of the CEOs of the companies, they have a product background and they still want to influence that. So that also applies if you are a very small company. So that's why I put either $3 or $1, because if you are an entrepreneur and your company is small, you are technically doing product stuff. You may not be making a lot of money, but you are also learning a lot and acting as the product manager. So that's another important thing to consider. It's not like, oh, if I want to be a product manager at a big company, I need to start a company and then I can sell them that I was an entrepreneur. No, it doesn't work that way. But I learned product management on the go by starting my own companies, for example. Even though I went to business school, but that was more of an anecdote than like the stuff that I had to do on a daily basis as a product manager was more based on my daily needs and experience than the books and my network when I was in business school, although that helped down the line. Cool. Types of PMs. Because when we say PM, it sounds great, right? And we are into it, so we are thinking PM as QuickBooks. But hey, there are also many other categories. And this is also very important as you apply for jobs. Because let's say that you are not a PM yet and you want to break into product. It's going to be very, very hard if you are, let's say, a consultant at a fintech company or ops in fintech, and then you try to become a PM in healthcare. It is too much of a difference. And especially if your company is very small, you're trying to jump into a large company. So things to consider is if you are in B2C, you may have more chances to do that switch in another B2C company or B2B. But also it's not just about the size or the type of end user. It's also about the type of product. Sometimes you may be working on a marketplace. Dynamics of a marketplace are extremely complicated and you need to understand them. It's very, very different than a SaaS product, for example, or a social network. Web versus mobile. And my point here is not like, oh my God, I need to study everything. By the way, there are way more categories than the ones that I just mentioned here. But with this, I'm just trying to make you think, what's your expertise? Like if you were to either break into product or try to grow your PM career, how can I leverage what I know? Because I still get this from a lot of our students who apply that say, hey, I want to be a product manager at Google. That sounds great. But we also need to prepare a path for that. You can't go from I'm working as a data analyst in a fintech company all the way to I want to be a PM at Google. We need to set up like realistic goals for this. And by the way, you may qualify for more than just one category, because depending on how you look at the product, let me give you an example. Let's say you work at Airbnb. Airbnb is a large company, largish company, but Airbnb is a marketplace. And Airbnb is typically B2C, although obviously they also have Airbnb for business, and depending on the area of your team, you may be also doing some B2B. So think about what you have and how you can sell it when you go and talk to another company, because if I were to go from Airbnb to a B2B company, I would probably be talking more about Airbnb for business and the type of partnerships and stuff that I had to do for that type of user. While if I had to apply to Uber, I would definitely leverage more my expertise building a marketplace or working on a marketplace. So think about that. Web versus mobile, same thing. So I'm just trying to give you options and food for thought. There's no right or wrong answer, and this is something I used to hate at the very beginning because everything is like, it depends. But at the end of the day, you also need to make a decision and go. So what's the perfect PM? And again, the points that I'm going to mention here are based on data. Based on data of our students who got jobs as PMs, and we saw what was the common pattern that they all followed. First one is technical background. And this is very tricky, because by technical background, I don't mean you have to be a software engineer. If you are a software engineer, great, you already have that technical background. But if you are not a software engineer, you can also build your technical background. What's almost impossible these days in Silicon Valley, in great companies, is to hire someone as a product manager who has zero technical background and zero willingness to learn more about how engineers work. I'm not saying you have to be an engineer. I'm saying you have to know something about tech. You need to speak tech because you're going to spend a lot of time with engineers and you need to earn the respect one way or another. So we're going to discuss some tactics now. The second skill set that I've seen is very, very important is the industry expertise. We talked briefly about that in the example of someone who works in fintech and is trying to go to healthcare. Try to understand what is really your industry expertise, and you may have more chances to grow if you stick to that. Now, what if I hate my life? I work in finance, I hate it. I really want to go to healthcare. Okay, you can do that. But maybe instead of doing like a full transition from, let's say, ops in fintech to PM in healthcare, you could do ops in healthcare and then PM in healthcare. Or from ops in fintech, you could try PM in fintech. Think about it as a matrix and try to go one step at a time. Then the third skill set is the communication skills. And this is something that at the same time, engineers usually have a bonus point with a technical background. They tend to suffer a little bit more with this part because we didn't have classes about public speaking. Nobody taught us anything about that. So as a manager, just think about this. I love this 80-20 rule for most of things in my life. But as a specialist, you are going to spend at least 80% of your time executing and 20% of your time doing something else. Let's say meetings, communications, or whatever. As a manager, you are going to spend at least 80% of your time communicating one way or the other, and only 20% of your time executing. So the transition from being a specialist, no matter what, data, program management, engineering, those are all very specific functionalities that the company needs. To, hey, I'm going to zoom out a little bit and I'm going to try to look at the big picture and try to coordinate teams. One big failure that I've seen and we try to help is when you are a manager, you have to think as a manager. And I know that sometimes you could fix it yourself, and I know sometimes you could do it better than your team member, but that's the moment you have to focus on teaching others and empowering others rather than doing it yourself. So that's something especially engineers tend to suffer more. When I say engineers, I mean like anyone that comes from a technical background that hasn't been exposed to a lot of client meetings like a consultant could be, for example. Like in New York, we get a lot of people that come from business. They feel really comfortable selling whatever, including themselves, which is great. But they probably need to also understand how to deliver. As engineers, I've seen so many people that are great and maybe can't sell themselves good enough, and they miss certain opportunities. So at the end of the day, you need to be good enough at pretty much everything. Let's talk about technical background. So as I said before, what I mean by technical background is you don't have to have a CS degree. If you do have a CS degree, great. You don't need to code like a pro. It's not about like, show me your GitHub page. No. But what's true is that you need to speak tech. You need to feel comfortable working with engineers at every single level. It's not just about, I need this feature. No, it's about really understanding architecture. It's about understanding the difference between front-end and back-end. It's about understanding the release cycle and what's GitHub and how they push code and what's a bug. This may sound silly or basic for some, but this may be like rocket science for others. You need to find that common baseline, at least to qualify for most of the PM positions. Obviously, if you're applying for a very technical product position, they are going to ask for way more than what I said. They may be asking for specific technical expertise and CS backgrounds. But the bare minimum, we all need to feel comfortable speaking tech. And speaking tech doesn't mean, and I took a Coursera course or a Udemy class here and 10 years ago, yeah, I did CS degree. No, it's more about really proving that you feel comfortable in an engineering room and that whatever you don't know, you can figure out. That's something that is critical. And here is some examples. I like to be tactical here and kind of suggest something that you can use if that's what you need. There is so many resources online. By the way, some of them are free. That the key here is not the content. You can find so many online tutorials about how to build a website. It's more about having the willingness to not give up. Think of like going to the gym. You need to put it on the calendar and show up. And you may not see results in the first month, but you need to keep believing and keep your motivation about the results. Coding is extremely frustrating, especially if you haven't done this before. I see some people smiling. If online is not for you, there is also so many offline options. There are some hardcore offline options, like coding bootcamps. I don't think you need to go that far. We actually created a course called Coding for Managers, which is exactly that, like the technical background that a manager would need. But you can check them out. There's also some like hybrid options I've seen out there, like Code Mentor, for example. They offer online mentorship. So you still need to show up to certain one-on-one meetings, but most of the content is online. It's more of a flexible model. Again, it's up to you, but eventually this will catch up. And if you've been in an interview for a PM role, you know what I'm talking about. The hardest way is to try to do it yourself. One of my most brilliant software engineers from Cuba, actually, he taught himself how to code, and that was incredible. But that's not obviously the norm. And then how can you prove it? Let's say you try to take some classes here and there, or you talk to your engineering friends. Anyway, you are in an interview and someone is asking you about your technical background. Well, best way you can show this is if you show your portfolio. If you can show a website or a mobile app that you built, that's the best way. It's better than any degree, it's better than any badge, anything. But you can also show your GitHub profile. You can, I got a student, we accepted a student to product school because she participated in a hackathon. She's not technical, but she went to a hackathon. It's a weekend event, 48 hours. She teamed up with a team of engineers. The three of them built a product. She was more of the business person there, but hey, she was able to put together a team and she delivered something and she was like, hey, and we won this hackathon. Awesome. Anyway, keep this in mind. Point here is that telling me that you watch a video about coding is never going to be enough. That can go actually against you. Let's talk about industry expertise. You don't need an MBA. I am trying to anticipate this question. Who here has an MBA or similar degree? Great. Same way I mentioned that having a CS degree is a great way to prove your technical background. Having a business degree or an MBA is a great way to prove that you know about business and you have some business acumen. Unfortunately, that's never going to be enough. So you also need to take that extra mile. Like, you don't need to be able to sell like a pro. It's not just like, oh, if I can sell myself or I can get a job. That will help, but that's not enough. What I'm talking about is being obsessed with your product, understanding your customers, understanding your market, understanding your competitors, understanding the process of how your product is built. It's pretty much being the mastermind behind everything that's going on. Like, you really need to love it. And I had this conversation with one of my students who was trying to apply to a product management position, and she said, hey, someone is telling me that I have to compromise something because I love EdTech, but these other companies offer me this opportunity as a PM, but I don't really like this product. Think about it. Like, you are going to spend at least 50 hours a week working on a product, working with people. If you don't really feel connected to that product and you are the advocate for the users, you know, like, oh, I'm just doing admin stuff here and there, I don't really care about the product. No, you are the face of that product in most of the cases. That's going to catch up with you. Yes, you will get the title, but that's not going to work. And when you see someone that got the title and left a company in limited time, that actually fires back. So think about that. You know, like, having a business acumen is critical, but it's not just about reading books or getting degrees. It's about going out there and proving that you truly care about this product and you know a lot. Some tactical ways to do this. Well, obviously, you can use that product. And there are companies, especially in B2C, that will ask you to show a profile. Like Dropbox, for example, will ask you to upload your resume through their Dropbox API. Airbnb will ask you to put your Airbnb profile. I mean, I'm not trying to say, hey, we all go and rent Airbnb apartments to prove that we care about the product, but it's a good way to show that, hey, I care about this. If you're applying for B2B, it is more complicated, right? But I'm sure there is a way for you to prove that you care. And I get it. Sometimes you're applying for an insurtech product that it is really tough to swallow. But maybe there is something about it that you enjoy. Maybe it's not just about the end user, but maybe it's about the process. Maybe you love getting things done. Maybe you enjoy that part. Maybe you enjoy working with very complicated problems. Like, find your angle. The same way we talked about the types of products and how you can leverage your background. When you try to think about this product, it's not just about the category, think about what makes you excited about that. And if the answer is, hey, nothing makes me really excited, well, then you got your answer. Maybe you don't have to apply there. This is just some examples, like obviously you're applying for an e-commerce company or a social media network or a marketplace, something that is more B2C, you can show profile. Something that worked really well, we actually recommended this. 2 of our students got hired by companies because then they, instead of just applying to the typical jobs, the company.com/jobs profile, they submitted a featured request to either a hiring manager or CEO directly, and in that feature request, they also requested an interview. That was a good way to invest time and prove that I care enough about this. This is not just my template cover letter saying, dear hiring manager. It's more about, I spend time, I care about this, here is how, can we talk? It worked really well. These 2 guys create a Medium article, they mentioned the CEO, they tweeted, like they found their way to connect with someone who could listen to them. And worst case scenario, if they don't listen to you, at least you have a beautiful template that you can reuse for another company that will listen to you.
Can you expand on more of some of those street smart things that you just mentioned?
The question is if I can extend a little bit more about the example that I just mentioned. Yeah, so for example, this company was Udemy.com. It's an online learning marketplace. Think of YouTube, but for education. And one of our students was really passionate about this. So what he did was to build a feature request for Udemy.com. It was a discussion forum where people could connect live. So they could do study sessions online, but live. Because their current forum is just very transactional. You have a question, you post, and you have to wait until someone replies. So they say, hey, why don't I create this feature so people who care about this specific content can coordinate and do, let's say, a Skype session. And he just created, obviously, the full, all the documents that you need, which takes time. You need to come up with a roadmap, you need to come up with wireframes, you need to define the persona, you need to really explain why there is a business return there, you need to talk about KPIs and so on. But he was able to put together a nicely done presentation into a SlideShare plugin, inserted into a Medium article. He tweeted that, he mentioned the CEO, he mentioned one of our instructors at Pro School who used to work at Udemy. So he actually did so much of that, then of course, why shouldn't you listen to him, right? Maybe you don't get the job, but it was really smart. And similar examples. Communication skills. This is what we talked before about. You don't need to be a public speaker, although it's great. You don't need to write a book, although it's great. It's more about feeling comfortable, getting your point across. And you're not going to spend most of your time on a stage giving keynote speeches. This is a nice cherry on top. But the reality is that you're going to be sending a lot of emails. You're going to be doing a lot of one-on-ones. You're going to be talking, having coffee meetings and talking with users and talking with internal team members. And I know sometimes it feels easier to reply things over email, or maybe not to not reply, period. Or maybe do it yourself and not delegate it and not teach someone how to do it. But that's the key that will set you apart. Like, can you grow with the product? Can you grow your team? Can you help others be better? And can you get the buy-in? Because sometimes, most of the times, it's not just about selling to users, it's about selling to your own team members. Imagine if you're a company like, just to follow the example, Airbnb. How many cool ideas are out there that we could implement? And the ideas don't come from the manager only, right? Ideas can come from engineers, from my parents, from data, from customers, from the CEO. So you are going to be competing with many PMs, with many ideas, and you need to navigate that and get the buy-in and set up your own team and make sure that people do that thing that you want, not because you are the boss, but because they truly care that this is the best thing for them and for the company. Obviously, we could extend so much about this topic, but communication skills is something that you can't just learn by reading a book, unfortunately. You need to learn by doing. And doing means start thinking about the emails that you send. And maybe this time, instead of just clicking send, you read the email one more time before you send it. Or maybe you think about, imagine if I'm the person receiving that email for a second. How would I think about it? Just quick tips. Or imagine if you think that there is potential of conflict in a company. I don't care, you may not be the product manager yet, but maybe you are in a situation where you see that there is potential for conflict. Two people are thinking different ways. Maybe you take someone for coffee. Just think that way. And it's amazing as you grow, how many times these patterns will repeat. And at some point in your career, you will see that most of this is not product-related problems, it's more people-related problems. And as you grow, people will get smarter than you, and they will be able to figure out the tactics. But that dynamic that keeps them together is exactly where the magic relies. Anyway, some tactical advice here. You can create a blog, although if you are going to do that, you need to make sure that you write consistently. Do not open a WordPress page and then just write an article because you want to get a job at whatever company and then you never post back again. If you are going to do that, you can use Twitter, or you can use Quora.com, or you can use any other forum out there about a specific topic or product or industry that you like, and do it. But if you don't feel like writing because you have nothing to say, that's totally fine as well. You can start by attending to events. This one is a great forum, for example, if you are into product. But if you are into, let's say, B2B, there are so many other forums about B2B and events and so on. Ideally, it's better to do this offline because you can also connect with like-minded people. And do not expect a job after a meetup. You know, you can't just be so transactional that comes to a meetup and start sending resumes. That's not going to work that way. It's more for you first, to really understand if this is something that you care. And maybe after coming to 6, 7 meetups, there is 1 or 2 people that you truly like. And who knows, maybe you start working on a project together. Or maybe you do nothing, but maybe 1 year from now, you realize that there is a way you can add value or you need to ask for a favor. But it's more of like a long-term investment. Do not think of building my network or my communication skills as a robot who is going to take a Toastmasters class and here is how I do my talks. Well, that could help, but you are not going to become a speaker unless you speak so many times. And by the way, something that one of my mentors taught me a few years ago is nobody wants you to fail. Like when I'm giving a talk here, you want me to do good so you can learn something and have a good time. Nobody's expecting me to fall down or to run out of ideas. So the same applies to you. If you're going to give a talk, especially if it's an internal forum, that's totally fine. I know, it sounds easy. It is not. It took me a lot of time. And in engineering school, they didn't teach me anything about public speaking. I had to put myself out there many, many times. And especially, you know, like with the accent, with this is not my first language, whatever. At the end of the day, nobody wants you to fail. And as you can get your point, as long as you can get your point across, that's good enough. And that applies to technical background, that applies to industry expertise. You just need to be good enough. I like B+ across the board more than A+ and C- in different skills. Anyway, this is just a quick summary about the technical skill, industry expertise, and communication skills. What you need and what you don't need. Last part of my presentation is the PNGO process. It especially applies to folks that are thinking about getting a job in product. This pyramid was built based on data. Again, this is something that we've been able to come up with after learning how our students can get PM jobs. If you are looking for a job within your same area of expertise, this may be way easier. But this is thinking maybe applying to something different. You are trying to switch careers or you are trying to switch industries. Well, if you look at the top line of the funnel, it says resume. Everything starts with a resume or a LinkedIn profile. A resume or LinkedIn profile will never get you a job. That's not optimized for that. That will give you an opportunity to talk to somebody. What I put on the site is 30 to 50. So basically, you are going to need between 30 to 50 resumes out in order to get 1 to 2 offers for a PM job in this case, if you haven't been a PM yet. But think of it, hey, I'm a PM and I'm trying to become a director of product, same deal. Like, if you are a PM and are trying to get another PM job, at least you could cut that in half. If you are going to try to apply for a job, I would treat this as a job itself. Otherwise, it's going to be complicated, and you don't need a system. If you are just going to go to LinkedIn and Indeed.com and Monster.com and apply every once in a while, you don't need a system. Just keep doing it and you'll keep getting the same results. But if you are trying to do this for real, I would definitely come up with a system where I am the product and I start with a list of companies on top of my funnel that I think are a good fit for me. So, if I haven't been a PM yet, putting things like Google, Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, LinkedIn is a little bit unrealistic. Hey, it might be the case that it's realistic, but in general, what I mean by 30 to 50 companies that are a good fit is companies that are part of your industry expertise, companies that are hiring, companies that are in a location that you are open to move, companies that are offering jobs within a salary that you are willing to take, and so on. So you have to do your research. It takes time, by the way. This could take up to 6 months. I see some people that get scared. The reward is high, but what I'm trying to do with this is not to scare you, but to make you think that this is very competitive. You are going to be competing with aspiring PMs, existing PMs, and everybody wants this now. So, not impossible, totally doable, but treat it as a challenge. You are the product, you are going to win. Second step is usually an interview. This interview is with a recruiter, most of the cases, not a product manager. So they usually follow specific criteria to make sure that you meet the profile, the user persona. I don't expect many technical questions here or specific questions about product, because if the person is not a product manager, it's going to be hard for them to ask it or assess it. But at least I want to understand that you've done product, you've built something, you have a process, and this would make me believe that, okay, I can connect you with a PM and maybe other team members like engineers or designers who will have better judgment and decide if you are a good fit. So if you can pass that, first of all, look at the cutoff. Like if you start from 30 companies on top of the funnel, you'll be lucky if you get 10 phone interviews. It's pretty strict. So if you are doing this already and you think that you are getting enough phone calls, maybe your LinkedIn profile and resume are good enough. Maybe you need to optimize more for the second part, which is how can I pass the interview. If you feel stuck with the first part, if you are not getting enough phone calls, then you definitely need to optimize for resume and LinkedIn. So treat this as a funnel. If you pass that interview, and I've seen different variations here, at some point they are going to ask you to prove your product management expertise. This is something that was very, very common in design. Designers have portfolios and engineers have code. What do product managers do? What do they have? Well, as we discussed before, now it's becoming more and more popular that you show something, and someone asked me to elaborate more about how can I prove that you can build a feature? Well, there we go. So keep that in mind. If you already have something, great, but I've seen companies that may ask you, hey, why don't you build a feature request and present it to us in the next in-person interview? So if you have a template, you can reuse it and of course customize it a little bit. But that's something that is becoming more and more common now these days. At some point you will have that second interview, either before or after that challenge, and then hopefully after all of that you should hear from the company. Again, 8 stuff, not impossible, but I hope this also gives you some clarity so you don't go out there against a black wall and thinking, oh my god, these product managers are so exclusive. Anyway, just to wrap up, this is all we do. We teach product management and we help people improve their career. So all of our classes are part-time and they are offline as well. So here in San Francisco and Santa Clara, we have 2 campuses. Those are the closest ones to you. We also have New York and LA. And this was our initial course. It's called Product Management. It's 2 months part-time. All of our instructors come from Apple, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Google. And we saw that this may be enough for a lot of people, especially if they come from technical backgrounds. But if you are an existing product manager, or you are trying to break into product, and you also need help with the technical part, we built this course called Coding for Managers as a good solution in between online free content and super intense coding bootcamps that teaches you enough about what you need to know, not to become a software engineer by any means, but to be technical enough to build your fully functional website and speak tech with engineers. Now what's going on is that this is getting more and more complex. So becoming a product manager 10 years ago was easier. Now they're going to ask you for so many different things that coding may not be enough. And we saw that, of course, their PM recruiter from Intuit mentioned this before. A/B testing is becoming extremely popular. But not just A/B testing, any web analytics tool, CQL, and soon a little bit of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we built this portfolio that is more of a menu instead of like a full-on 1 year full-time course. So depending on what you need and when you need it, you can decide if this is something that could help. So if you think that I can be helpful in any way, please reach out to me. This is my email, carlos@productschool.com, and that's our website. You can find more information about how to apply and how to come to any of our upcoming events. Thank you very much.
Thanks for a great talk. So I realized that because we started late, I kind of did a short, quick intro. So I left off a couple of important things. You're right. So last 2 summers, we did a very fun panel on how to get a job in a PN, how to grow your skills, and Carlos was on both of those and did an awesome job. And Product School has been a sponsor from the beginning of our meetup. So thanks for an awesome talk. This is the part where we open up the Q&A for you guys so that everybody hears, despite these mics, hopefully. Brian over there is the sole volunteer. Big props to Brian for keeping everything running smoothly tonight. Just raise your hand and Brian and I will give you a mic, okay? And then just, instead of picking whoever's got their hand up, whoever's got the mic gets to talk, all right? So who's got a question for Carlos? All right.
My name is Iji, and my question is, it's like some people talk about the agile in MVP, minimum viable product. Can you mention that about the product management?
Mm-hmm.
Why or why not?
Well, I didn't use that buzzword, although there is a slide in the presentation. The question is about MVP, minimum viable product, and agile, and Scrum, and why didn't I mention some of those buzzwords during my presentation? Part of your learning as a PM is going to be to understand what all of this means, right? We've all heard about Lean Startup, we've all heard about Scrum, and Agile, and Waterfall, and MVP, and post-market fit, and whatever. But what does that really mean? Well, let me just clarify at least the MVP part. When I created a slide at the very beginning and I talked about types of products, and I said startup versus large company, in general, when you are in a startup, your company is pre-market fit, pre-product market fit, which means we are all trying to figure out what resonates. We are all moving fast, breaking things, building stuff, and see if something sticks. And then once that thing sticks, then we can focus more on optimizing. So if you are one of those types who enjoys moving fast, breaking things, kind of hustler, like I can focus, I really want to tackle everything, startups are for you. As your company evolves and your product matures, you will realize that you can't just break things as you want, right? Think of LinkedIn, for example. Imagine that you are a PM for LinkedIn profiles. Well, at that stage, you are probably optimizing more. You are A/B testing more, you are tweaking, you are looking at data, because every little change means a lot of money and a lot of other metrics that are important to you. So MVP, which is pretty much that, minimum viable product, is more about those terms. It's like, am I going to be focusing on building something and testing if that works before I scale it? Or am I going to join a team that has something that works so I can focus more on the scaling part? Now, Agile is another interesting term that is very popular. Agile and Waterfall are usually the 2 more common school of thoughts when it comes to building software. So traditionally speaking, most of the companies would follow like a waterfall process where I start with one step, and then only when I'm done with that first step, I move on to the next step, and so on. So think of, hey, I need to build this thing. Well, I need to gather the requirements, I need to plan, I need to execute, I'm going to test, and this way, after I'm done, then I'm going to evaluate what's going on, and then I'll decide if I can go through the whole thing again. While Agile, and by the way, I'm oversimplifying, but I'm just trying to make sure that you get the point. It's more about, okay, I know what you want to get. But instead of spending a lot of time in each step, I'm just going to try to do all steps in smaller increments so I can gather requirements, plan, execute, test, something small, and then from there I'm going to gather some feedback so I can start the next iteration with some more information. So this way I can influence the end product before I need to wait until the first iteration according to waterfall. I'm not saying waterfall is bad, agile is good. Depending on the product, the client, and so on, there are different scenarios, but we also cover that, yes.
So I would assume waterfall goes for bigger companies?
So the question is, so for waterfall, is that something that applies to bigger companies?
My hand up for a mic, guys. Remember, let's do that.
The answer is most of the cases, yes, because if you have less clients and they are telling you exactly what they want, maybe you can focus more on them because they already have, they know what they want, so you can do a longer planning process. But not just for larger clients. Think of a smaller web agency. Think of a small client that just wants a website. Well, the agency concept at the end of the day is, I have a customer comes to me, I gather requirements, I need to plan how much time I'm going to spend so I can budget and give a proposal. It's kind of waterfall in most of the cases because it's only when I gather requirements that I can send you a quote. It's only when you approve this quote when I can execute. And if for whatever reason, most of the cases you will want more changes or things, we will probably need to recreate another budget to do that thing. While if you are in a product that is yours, that is trying to approach to so many customers that you don't really know what the end result is, Agile has proven better results.
Yeah, just wanted to tell you my situation, right? So I was engineering manager for a few years, many years, and then I helped build an escalation team in an engineering group. And I wanted to get into product management in between. And I always had a difficulty to communicate that because I didn't have the title of product manager, even though I've done a lot of it. I even helped deliver those features and everything, work with customers, got their requirements and everything. But whenever I apply, if I say I'm an escalation manager, I don't get a job in engineering, even though I've done it many years, I've done the whole cycle. And the same thing with the product manager, even though I've done it, I don't have the title, and that's a challenge. I think most people have.
Yeah, that's a really good question. The question is about titles. Let's say I'm an engineer and I've done a lot of product, but my official title is not product. So when I try to go out there and apply for a product job, the first question is, you are not a product manager. But you are like, yes, I've done this and that. Obviously, it's a challenge. It would be easier if you had the title. Let's assume that you don't have that title. And this is something extremely common among our students. So first advice here is, you have to speak product. I get that your title is escalation manager, but that may be very easy to understand in your specific company or maybe in your specific industry. If I kind of zoom out a little bit and try to go to another company, I may not, especially if I'm a recruiter and not technical, I may not get what an escalation manager means. Maybe there is a better way that you can rephrase it so someone who is not in that world can understand you. I'm not saying you have to lie and say I'm a product manager, but maybe something along the lines of product escalation manager or something. You will decide what's the right word that at least from the outside I can get you, so I can speak. And then in the interview, you can give me more details and say, well, the official title is escalation manager. I put product so I could explain to someone outside of my world that I've been doing product this way. Now, it's not just about the title, it's also about the summary and the bullet points that you use. I've seen it many times, especially with engineers. I look at LinkedIn profiles or resumes, and I could never tell that this person is applying for a product management job. It's impossible, because I see JavaScript, C++, Swift. Okay, I get that you know how to code. Especially you were telling me, you have more than 5-10 years of experience, and I get that you know how to code. But I also get, what I don't get is that you're trying to apply to a non-coding job. So you have to focus more about those leadership accomplishments or those product-related projects that you've done. Like, for example, hey, I'm an escalation manager, but I have a team of 5 engineers, and I've been leading the technical implementation of every new feature. Okay, I get that you have experience working with other people. I get that you have the expertise of understanding a complex problem and break it down into an actionable item. I get that you may not work with designers, but at least I see some leadership skills right there. You know, it's more about trying to feature what it is that the other person needs instead of more technical stuff that someone that is not technical won't get.
So what you can
We can follow. We can follow on if you want, or you know, we can take it offline.
Hi. I want to expand on one of the points that you may have overlooked a little bit, and that is, you mentioned several times, you know, show how you can lead a team and all this, and make money. And I'd like to offer the opportunity to consider public interest jobs and nonprofits, because in those cases, it's not always make money, it's achieve wide adoption of your product or whatever.
100%, and I completely agree with your point. Like, if you look at, this is about the slide when we're talking about this industry domain and how you can prove that you have technical acumen. I mentioned that you need to know everything about the product, industry, market, competitors, and so on, so you can build something that your users love. And I put in between parentheses, and makes you money if you're in a for-profit company. We actually have a partner, which is a non-profit that hires some of our students to just give back, and that is amazing because this is another way for students or aspiring PMs to prove that they can build something. And at that point, they may not be optimizing for money, which is something that's very important. If you are looking at the long-term win, maybe your next job is not your dream job, but maybe that's good enough.
Right. I'll give the example, which is not a student transitioning job, but a professional job where we've been working for the past couple of years with election officials to improve ballots, voter information guides, all the collateral that they provide to voters so that people will actually look at it and use it before they go to the ballot box.
100%. Really good point.
So I think you did a really good job about talking about all the different characteristics generally for a PM. I'm wondering, from the wide array of all the PMs that you know, what are some patterns or characteristics of like the really game-changing PMs, the ones that are just exceptional in your opinion?
It's a very, very broad question. I'm going to try to kind of narrow this down a little bit more. These are for me, or not just for me, but based on data, the most common characteristics that we are looking for across the board. Now, if you're looking at a very specific type of product, there may be more. I'm just going to give you a quick example for product school, for example. We hire a lot of product managers to teach our courses, and they are all extraordinary. They are at least senior level PMs at Google, Facebook, Twitter. So they also have, most of them also have some experience working at startups, maybe non-profits, and other organizations. So they're incredible, but just by looking at the LinkedIn profile. Now, how can you separate both incredible and understand who would make a great product management instructor? Well, in my specific case, I'm also looking for some signs that tells me that this person is really motivated for giving back. To her point about the non-for-profit, I mean, we are not a non-for-profit, but the motivation of our instructors is definitely not to make money, because they are obviously making way more money at Uber, Facebook, and so on. So they need to have the time, they really need to have that willingness to give back. And how can they prove that they could make good instructors? Because if you look out there, there are not that many product management instructor opportunities outside of product school. Well, if you have participated hiring product managers, that tells me that you understand what you need to get from other people with less experience. If you have experience mentoring other product managers, like for example, we hire a lot of PMs that participate as mentors in the Google APM program. So they are not teachers per se, but they help aspiring PMs become PMs. So that is huge for us. People that have experience participating in events, meetups, they've contributed to a book, they're active on a Medium blog, they prove that they are taking that extra mile. They are not just a senior PM at Facebook, for example. That for me is absolutely critical. But just one example.
Can I ask a question to extend the agile versus waterfall? So we are doing a very big project. You know, the product may take a couple of years to develop, and we are also at the same time trying to adopt, safe, scalable agile framework. And often the time I receive a lot of questions from our other product managers. We are doing agile, so we don't need to understand the end-to-end picture. But on the other side, for development in QA, and the operation, right? They really need to understand the end-to-end picture, the how the, it may not be the exactly the end product look like, but they need to understand the high-level picture. So I would like to hear your,
The question is about agile, because if you ask someone, do you do agile? They're going to say, yes, right? Everybody will say that they do agile or they do Scrum or whatever is cool in any given point. You have to understand the following, which is agile is just a set of principles and good practices that we all understand and then try to adapt to our specific situation. One of our instructors is a product manager at Levie, and he was telling us he's working with 2 engineering teams. One of his teams is very, very agile according to what we define, but another one is not. And he's able to handle 2 different teams. And he said, it is easier for me to adapt to my specific team and product than for me to go with a framework and say, and we all follow this ABC. So I like to look at it as a nice set of guidelines rather than as fixed instructions. So think about that way and kind of step out of the word agile and try to understand what that really means in a specific case.
Hey, so this is for people who are trying to transition to product management. I was in the same shoes 1 year ago in August. I took the product management course at product school, and it was the best investment in my career. And I will. Back then, it was actually cheaper than what the price is today. So I will ask everyone to check out the website. Question actually. So Carlos, you talked about people who want to go for a job as a product management, but there are some of us who don't want to go for an interview, want to build our own product, and that would be actually a good way of starting your career as a product manager and then maybe find a job. So what would be your advice? Because challenges are totally different starting your own product manager / CEO.
Thank you. Really good point. Building a product is not just about becoming a product manager. And if you look at my background, for example, I became a product manager by building my own companies, even without the title. So for me, the mindset is very similar. At the end of the day, you are going to be working with a team of specialists to build something bigger than yourself. And you can decide if you want to apply that to your own company or you want to apply that to another company. And you can see a lot of product managers that become founders, a lot of founders that become product managers. It is not that different. Obviously, if you are in a smaller organization, you may need to take some shortcuts, and maybe your agile process is not as beautiful and polished as if you are agile in a larger organization where you also have to navigate more layers of politics, right? But at the end of the day, this is not about, and you have to be a product manager. This is about building products and you deciding where you want to build them. And if you haven't done this before, you don't have to ask for permission because you can build something. And it doesn't really need to be a serious startup. It can be a side hustle. These days, you can go to WordPress, Squarespace, Wix.com, whatever, build your website, build your mobile app, even without code, and start integrating tools and creating an email newsletter with MailChimp and a landing page with Instapages and so on, and learn so much that then you can see if this is something that you can do bigger, or you just want to reuse that to explain to someone that, hey, I'm more than just my title. So I think it's a really valid point.
Hey Carlos, I'm Zeb. I come from a business consulting background, and you touched on that, so it really resonated for me. So it's empowering because I actually am looking at making a transition, and so I'm hearing a lot of things that really help me. But my question is regarding some of these people that go through your school in New York. You said a lot of them are consultants, right? Mm-hmm. So what is the one of the biggest areas that you've seen in them that they need to improve in order to make that transition, right?
Okay, really good point. So in general, people that come from consulting backgrounds, they're really fast learners because they jump from client to client, industry to industry. They can prove that, hey, no matter what you give me, I can give you advice. Now, you can't stop there. And that is probably the biggest part. Like, you also need, as a product manager, you participate in the discovery process where you need to pick the problem you are going to tackle next. But then, you are also going to participate in the execution of the solution. And in general, as consultants, once we figure out what the client has to do, we technically move to another client to do the same. We don't always spend like all the cycle there. So being more tactical, understanding tech and getting a technical background, understanding the lingo and product management, because the same way as engineers, we tend to feel afraid of speaking in public. You may feel very empowered to speak in public, and sometimes it's also good to step down and listen and see, okay, maybe I don't get this, I'm not in consulting or sales mode, it's more about learning mode. So we all need to combine a little bit of everything. In general, consultants make great product managers, and you can read an article, one of our instructors in New York, VP of product from LearnFest, former consultant. We have so many people from McKinsey, BCG, and so on. They are incredible, and what we've seen is that once they break into product, their career path goes way faster, because they already have those communication and leadership skills to get the buy-in from many different stakeholders.
Yeah, I was just wondering why, and I'm assuming this is partially why you started the school, but why do you think that product management hasn't been an officially taught, like, part of normal education? We go for engineering, we go for business, we go for different things, but product management, and maybe it's changing, I haven't kept up with what all the schools are doing nowadays, but I'm just curious, like, why do you think that is?
I'm with you. I just couldn't understand why. So that's why I did it. I went to engineering school, and I also went to business school. I think there's benefits in both. Engineering school will teach you very tactical stuff, low level, how things work. Business school will teach you a lot of good stuff in terms of high level strategy, communications, but I was missing that piece in between that is like, okay, how can merge both and be tactical enough and business enough? So I guess that in the future there will be some product management classes as part of MBA programs, because it makes sense. But at the same time, this is not easy, and this is not for everybody. Like, we are in Silicon Valley, and oh my God, there's 100 people in this room. So we think that everybody wants to be a product manager. But this is just the early beginnings. You need enough engineers and designers and marketers to recognize, oh my God, someone has to put some order in the house. So there will always be more demand for technical jobs, and there will always be less demand for managerial jobs. The thing in tech is that you can't just do a strategy. There's no such a thing as strategy in a startup. Even the strategic CEO has to execute something. So that's why the product management role is becoming more and more relevant.
I know that you have your own book, and of course you have your own course. But for some of us, like myself, I'm just visiting Silicon Valley, visiting U.S. as a whole, so I won't be able to participate in in much of physical courses. Is there other collateral material that you would indicate for someone who's trying to learn more about product management?
Absolutely, there's so many online resources out there. I think I will start probably with the Slack community of this Meetup group. There's really good content and people there. The book is also a really good online material. We have the Kindle version and the physical copy, which would help you. Obviously, you can only go so far with a video course or a book or a chat forum, but that would probably get you started. And maybe there is some people within your community that can also keep you accountable and get together and build something. But obviously, the biggest demand that we see for product is in Silicon Valley, LA, and New York.
Carlos, I think the talk was really useful. Just a question. So, somebody who has been in B2B for a long time, how do you demonstrate B2C kind of like broader mindset? How do you make the transition? Do you have like any advice on that?
So the question is, if you are coming from B2B, how can you prove that you have some expertise about B2C? Yeah. Well, first answer is you really need to have it. Do you have it? Or do you want an answer just to kind of pretend that you have it?
Well, I want to make the transition, right? So
okay.
How do you demonstrate that, right?
Well,
and of course, I believe I have.
So that is the first point. Yeah. We all need to be on the same page here. This is not about reading how to crack the interview and then I go out there and make it happen. If we believe that we already have that and we just need to explain it better, we had a few examples before about the title and the bullet points that we need to feature on LinkedIn profiles and resumes. In this case, which is probably more of the interview part, you need to think about this first. Yes, let's say B2B product that we all understand. Let's talk Salesforce, for example, okay, a CRM, where it is B2B because you are selling your product to someone. The person who will pay for the license is not necessarily the person who is going to be using the license, right? Like maybe the CFO authorizes the purchase, but it's the sales team who's going to be using Salesforce on a daily basis. But let's say you work as a PM at Salesforce, which is traditionally a B2B product. But in reality, there are a lot of PMs there that are doing B2C stuff because they are working on their clients or their users are the sales team. They need to understand how they use the product so they can tweak it and make sure that it is usable for the person who needs it on a daily basis. There may be other PMs who are working on pricing and other things to reach out to more decision makers like CFOs. So that might be an angle. For example, if you can prove that even within B2B, there is an end user and you are working with that end user, that may help.
Okay, well, if we don't have any more, we'll wrap up. I'm happy to hang out and do one-on-one questions with people. We do a little, okay, so yeah. So we'll do that. Let's give Carlos another round of applause.
Thank you.